Okay, we're live. We got Powell Cucchiella on, licensed mental health counselor based out of Albany, New York, former Division One soccer player at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. We've been working together and kind of bouncing ideas off each other. Well, mostly me bouncing ideas off him for the past year, I'd say. And I've heard nothing but great things from the athletes that you've worked with. So I'm excited to have you on today for our topic, mindfulness. And yeah, if you don't mind introducing yourself to everyone listening, about your background, kind of why you got into this and education and your athletic, history and experiences that can, obviously help you relate to the athletes that you work with.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. And it's been wonderful being with you for this last year of seeing your trajectory of where you started, what your vision was, and it could just continue to put action into that to create what you have. And it feels like it's really growing. And every time I see an email from you or a new podcast up, I'm like, oh, like you're working hard and you keep putting them out. So good for you. So yeah, and then so you mentioned there that I'd went to as a Division One soccer player and from UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. It's in obviously in Maryland. It was a homegrown product of a soccer player that played club soccer all the way through, and that was life for me, as it is for many competitive athletes. They're doing it all the time, and soccer was it for me. And I played lacrosse too, and I guess those were the two sports that I was pretty good at, and had to make a decision at some point actually of which one to go play college with, and soccer was the choice. And the interesting thing was is that I never had put any thought into the mental side of things because I was a very talented guy that was always the talent led me to be able to be effective in middle school, high school, club, whatever it was. I was always pretty dominant, not having to think about that much and not having to go through a lot of failure because my talent was high. But then I got to college and I realized quick where the level of play was more on par with what I was where my talent was. I was met with a lot of inconsistency and things that didn't go my way at times and criticism and getting benched for the first time in my life and in all of that realized that I was a very inconsistent player. So that all happened in college where I really had some struggles with my ability to be consistent as an athlete. And I'd go out sometimes and be one of the best players on the field, and then I'd go out the very next game and be one of the worst. And I was that kind of player. And didn't really figure it out. I got better as my time went on there, but never really was the player that maybe I should have been, which might have been on a professional track, and I never got to that point. But soon after that time, I got very interested in what happened, why, like I realized it was a kind of a mental thing at that point, and I just really started to dive in to understand the mind, the mental side of things, and then in those early years started to learn a lot more about how my mind works, and even when what we'll get into today was my introduction into the mental side was through mindfulness meditation and really clued me in to what was the potential was with my mind and how I could work with it to improve it and get more control over it. That was all through meditation. But I've talked a lot there and I've missed, there was a whole gap of things I didn't even get into. You asked a good amount of questions in the beginning. I never even got to most of
No, but I want to just quickly, before we dive into mindfulness and meditation and that, our topic for today, I wanted to talk about quickly what you had mentioned and touch on that about, I feel like there are two athletes that play at a high level. They're the ones that have been dominant forever. And I'm not going to say things have came easy by any means, but just been dominant and had that consistent level of play of always being better than most. And then there's been the athletes that have kind of scratched and clawed and made their way and found that career path and made it to high levels. But at the end of the day, you're going to hit a point where there's going to be some adversity, and how to navigate that is extremely important. Which I think all athletes will face that adversity at some point. And so I'm excited to kind of dive into this because mindfulness, what is that? I think we hear that a lot these days. Meditation, what is that? How does it help? So I'm excited for you to kind of dive into it, and I'll kind of give you the floor here. But I want to start off with mindfulness, meditation, specifically mindfulness. What is that? How can a parent listening who just hears that buzzword, or an athlete listening hearing that buzzword, what does it actually mean? How is it effective for athletes?
Sure. And it is certainly a buzzword. It's been around for some years now, and likely everyone's heard of that word, but and how they apply it will be different.
Mhm.
And so mindfulness, as in its definition, is paying attention on purpose to the present moment, over and over again. And so realizing that we very quickly we might have a second or two in the present moment, but how quickly we then get out of the present moment. And with certainly kids today are even worse with that. The idea of technology, and they're overly stimulated all the time, and they have minds or brains that are used to constantly switching and constantly going from thing to thing to thing to thing. And that might even be a bit different than 10, 15 years ago when that presence of technology, presence of social media wasn't around. And I'm a big fan of social media, but certainly there's some big downsides to it. And I think that's it. It's training our minds to constantly be moving, wandering, and switching attention. And there's not really any training for that. Kids go to school and they train their ability to think critically and to solve problems, but how their mind actually works and how to get control of their mind, there's no training in that. And I think mindfulness is the core training of that. Just as we would have no problem running for cardio or skating or getting into the weight room and lift weights, we know we need to do that to increase our physical strength. Well, mindfulness is the tool that is the same thing for our mental strength. And so it is paying attention on purpose to the present moment. And so that can mean lots of different things. And when I'm introducing athletes to it, especially teenagers, I try to bring it into like this idea of senses. Like we we experience the world through our senses, through smell, touch, taste, sight, etc., feel, and so we can access the present moment through that. And so so each sense has its ability to then to have us pay attention to it for some moments, and then that all of those ways offer different types of activities to access the present moment. So mindfulness is just that. It's getting out of our head, out of our thoughts, and coming back into the present moment. Now, why is that important? Certainly, we know that athletes or anyone that has to perform, whether it's on stage or as artists or in a presentation, we perform our best when we are in the present moment and not thinking. That like couples with this idea of flow. And so we know that that's the case, but there's this paradox with athletes that as soon as we are in pressure situations, it's our natural ability to want to think. We are used to trying to think our way through situations. That is what we want to do, which is the paradox because we perform our best when we're not thinking. And so it's kind of training athletes to become aware of their thinking, but become aware of their ability to get out of their heads. Mindfulness is that key, and the training of it is mindfulness and meditation.
Awesome. One thing immediately comes to mind. I think a lot of athletes are going to relate to this. I think it's an important thing to touch on as it relates to getting back to the present moment. Um, I make a mistake in a game. I know I've made a mistake, whether it's soccer and I get to stay out on the field. Your brain, I feel like as an athlete, a lot of athletes can relate to this. And correct me if I'm wrong, but your brain's gonna immediately start firing and think, why did I make that mistake? Why should I have done this? And you're gonna, oh, I'm playing bad, and you're gonna start going down that rabbit hole, right? Or you come back to the bench in hockey, let's say, and a coach starts getting on you. You can't make that play. You can't make that play. And then you have those moments in between shifts where you now have to sit with yourself, or maybe, and then I consider both those high pressure situations, or games on the line and you get called. Maybe you go out there all the time, but you haven't been producing, or maybe you're someone that doesn't go out there all the time and you're expected to now produce late in a game, score a goal, make a defend a big play. I feel like and this personal experience and from the athletes that I see and work with, their brain starts to work, or you see them start to get out of the moment and into their head. So my question for you is, what would you tell an athlete? How do you train an athlete, or what's something an athlete can do in that moment they make a mistake, or in that moment they're called to be the guy, where they start to get an overactive brain? What can they do to get back into the present moment so they're now not thinking of all the different scenarios or how they made a wrong move in a scenario, and get back into the present moment? So sorry for being long-winded there, but was trying to paint a picture of a situation where you would train a kid, an athlete, to be in the present moment during those high pressure situations.
Sure, and you mentioned a few things, and certainly on the front end of what you mentioned, there's lots of things that could cause an athlete to get into their head. And whether it's fear of failure or fear of judgment from others, fear of disappointment, disappointing others, fear of criticism, fear of not living up to their own potential. Like they put in all this work and then like what if I don't succeed in this moment that I've been training for? That's all of those things are fears or limiting beliefs that cause us to get in our head. And then that's natural. We know that that's going to happen. But yes, the ability to then get out of our head is important. And if I were working with an athlete, if it was a one-on-one deal, I would first be getting into those things. Hey, let's be aware of the fears that are coming up for you, why they're coming up. What are those things rational at all or not? To like really get to the underlying like subconscious stuff that's going on that's causing us to get in our head and feel anxious maybe. But once we've done that, it's all right, let's figure out the skills. And there are a couple, and one is there's a balance of thinking and present moment because we're going to think, and sometimes thinking like self-talk, visualization, like those things are obviously helpful too. And so we need to be thinking a little bit, which I do encourage athletes to do. The first thing I really do want athletes to do is become aware of the one, two, or three controllable actions that they should be doing that they have control of. And so if it is a hockey player, it's like being aggressive, being physical, wanting the puck, trying to skate, trying to attack the goal, trying to do things that are confident actions versus playing it safe. And so every single athlete I work with, it's let's kind of get aware of their confident process. And that way they know the types of things that they should be doing. And as soon as then they know the types of the process they should be doing, it's okay, get out of your head and go do it. And for some, it might be I'm always starting with maybe a little quick thought or affirmation of go or like stop or like whatever like some sort of word is that triggers stop thinking, trust. It might be a line. Like if it's a hockey player on a bench and they know that they're about to cross that threshold onto the ice. There's a line there. And so for them, it's a symbolic, like, as soon as they cross the line, it's trust. And then done thinking, they're going. And so there's like a word or a line that they can associate with, like, all right, I'm done thinking. That's number one. But then the second is, I think the very first thing I'm always going for is training them to get in touch with their breathing. I think that present, like the breath is always there. Our visuals will change, our sounds will change, our smells will change. Like everything changes, but our breath is always there. So if we can train ourselves to come back to the feeling of breath, being aware of it, the sensation in, I would ask you now, is the breath that you're breathing in cooler or warmer than the breath that you breathe out? Question for you.
Breath I'm breathing in right now, cooler.
Cooler. And so, right in that moment, you put all of your attention into the feeling of breath as it was going in. And
Hmm.
you labeled it in your head as cooler or warmer. But in that one moment, you then connected with breath and the sensation of it. And so, what I want athletes to train is the sensation of breath as it goes in, not only right at the tip of their nose, but down into their chest, down into their stomach. Can they start to become really present with the feeling of breath? That to me is a very easy way for us to get present, and it's a trainable thing, and it's always with us. So for people listening, I would say if we were going to think about something that we can put some awareness into, it's like, all right, like find your breath, feel your breath, and then go do a confident action. Those couple things would be my first steps towards it.
Awesome. I love that. So basically, the self-talk piece of trusting yourself, finding, three things that you're good at that make you successful, which is important to know. That way it kind of takes away all the excess noise and then just getting back into the present moment by breathing. Um, okay. Awesome. And then one thing
Which
that
is
came,
one.
well, yeah.
Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt there. That is one.
No, no,
Like,
no,
and
that's
that's
fine.
just like there's an infinite number of different things we can pay attention to.
For
Breath is
sure.
what I start with.
Cool. No, I love that. One thing that's coming to mind right now is more of a question that I have on something that I've kind of been applying to my coaching, but I feel like it's beneficial. But I want to run it by you before I, continue taking this approach. a lot of athletes apply a lot of pressure on themselves, and that to be the best, I think there's a level of pressure that you have to apply to yourself, and that comes from a holding yourself to a standard, right? I was one of those players that held so much pressure on myself to do well or to be what I thought I could be that it became sort of debilitating in a way. So again, back to what I was trying to say, the one thing that I'm trying to tell players is you make a mistake, who cares? Right. And it's not to say that you don't care about executing or not. It's a matter of more so you're going to make mistakes. Who cares? Learn how to flush that. Right. And I feel like going back to what I previously said about when you make a mistake, you start getting in your head. Is it a good thing to tell players that or to teach athletes? And is it something that you do that um, part of it is to just wipe that slate clean and yes, sit on it for a second and recognize you made a mistake, but then immediately flushing it and saying, "Who cares?" And back to it because I feel like a lot of players hold things. I was someone that held things after the game, day after the game, two days after the game, and that's not. I know I'm not unique in that. I know a lot of athletes do that, but I wanted to kind of hear your approach on kind of that "who cares" kind of mentality after making a mistake.
Sure. And you that's a great approach. I think it is in what I've tried to do is kind of categorize the amount of different positive thoughts that we can have and put labels to them. And this might not be, I'm not going to live or die by this theory. It's something I've created myself. But I've come down to there being seven different types of positive thoughts that we can think that are helpful to us. And of course, or seven different types of categories of thoughts. And one of them is the mandatory one. I only have one of the seven are mandatory, and that one is the process thoughts. And so knowing and applying a confident process and knowing what they are, thinking them, that's one that's mandatory. You kind of with like who cares are going into a separate category of thoughts, maybe that are perspective thoughts, like really creating perspective around the situation and the thought of who cares or like uh, I've, with like older athletes that might swear, sometimes they put different like little phrases that like offer
Yep.
like who cares? Like, and like forget it. Like there's like little quick little thoughts that create perspective that this little situation really is not that big of a deal when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
later in your life. This will not matter.
Correct.
And so that all kind of goes into this category. And by you having a phrase that you automate and you kind of routine or you put routine to it and train it, then as soon as you make a mistake, if you can start to associate that phrase or that word right after mistakes of you're fine, forget about it, who cares? Then go to your process. It's like you're starting to really get control of your thinking. Your thinking is so important, and so you having little phrases that they can have are important. You're also with the phrase "who cares." You're trying to dig into the underlying fear of failure that so many athletes have. And every athlete, I think, that comes to me, there's some sort of fear of failure or mistakes, which causes them to get in their head, causes them to lack confidence. That's one of the things underneath of it. So yes, little phrases of self-talk that you kind of routinely say are helpful. I would also encourage you to ask your team if the who cares thought is something that doesn't resonate with them, what would? And
Mm-hmm.
let's start to train a thought that we can apply right after mistakes, and then go to your confident process, get present.
Awesome. All right. Good to know. I'm doing the right thing or on the
Yeah,
right track
good.
at least. So mindfulness, in a nutshell, is training your body to be and training your mind and body to be in the most present moment. Um, and I saw something about Michael Jordan. I don't know where I saw it and what the reference was or where it came from, but he had an ability to be in the most present moment at all times. Um, would you say that that's part of what it takes to be elite is trying to find that, you know, the ability to execute comes from being as present as possible and kind of getting out of the thinking brain?
I think so. I think so. And certainly different athletes have an ability to do that naturally or not. And I think if you are an elite athlete and you do struggle to get out of your head, then you're going to have inconsistent performance. There's just no way you can be consistently at your potential if you're in your head often.
Hmm.
So that's just a part of the deal. And yes, as I said, some personalities are naturally able to not be in their head, and that's helpful. But I think the more we go through this younger generation, I think that's going to be less and less that type of kid just naturally is able to do that. I think the presentation of mental skill and mental performance, insights and understanding should be a natural part of what these kids are getting so that they are able to have an understanding of the skill. Like it's a skill. Why are we not teaching mental skill just like we're teaching every other physical and technical skill that goes into sport? The ability to get presence important. And I think it's the one mindfulness or meditation is one that doesn't usually get a full amount of attention because it's one of those background things. Like it's like strength training where it's like, yes, we know we should do it, but we don't often like think about it right away, like unless there's a problem. And so like we know self-talk or visualization, there's like an immediate benefit to it that we can sometimes see and feel. Mindfulness is like that background piece that may not feel like it's an immediate benefit, but it's a training tool all to help us to become aware of what's going in our head and the ability to kind of dissociate or disconnect from the thoughts that come through. Just like clouds in the sky, it's a very popular metaphor that, the sky is this clear sky, but then thoughts come through and those are clouds in the sky. So if we treat our thoughts like clouds in the sky that are just passing through, and they are not the sky, they're just passing through the sky. And so we don't have to identify with them, they just pass through, and then we're on to the next. And
Hmm.
the problem is that most people kind of are stuck in the clouds and like jump from cloud to cloud to cloud without recognizing that they are not those clouds. If they were to drop down and just observe the clouds passing through, it would have much better control of what then they choose to think rather than being so consumed by whatever clouds in there in that moment. And I think
Hmm.
that's the training is to become observant of the clouds, witness them rather than being stuck in them.
Yeah, that's a good way of shifting that perspective. And you mentioned meditation and the training of mindfulness, and I want to jump into that. Is the way how do you train mindfulness, and is the way that you train mindfulness through meditation? And if so, how is that? Like, what is meditation? Is it sitting there for 20 minutes? Is it just taking a couple moments in the morning to just get in touch with your breath and breathe and close your eyes, keep your eyes open, lay down, sit down? Like, how do you train mindfulness and how does meditation kind of, fit into the puzzle of all this?
Yeah, and in mindfulness is a form of meditation. And in meditation at its core is paying attention, like taking your attention, putting it into something. And just like mindfulness is, but it's when the mind wanders away, we come back. Meditation could be putting your attention on a mantra or putting your attention on a visual that you put in your head or putting your attention to the present moment. So meditation is putting your attention on something, and when the mind wanders away, we bring it back. And that's the training. And I learned this. To tell a quick story, I was a guy that was very much in my head in my youth and all up into like 22, 23, where I was an anxious guy and was had trouble and no awareness of what's going on there. But then I was and had a pretty difficult childhood as well, where both of my parents passed away young. I was, 19 when my mother passed away and my father passed away 2 years before that. So I'm still in college when both of my parents have passed away, and so that was a significant piece of my life, and certainly in through college, like getting through that. And then now I didn't have any parents, and so on the other end of that, I'm walking through streets of Baltimore where I was, and I was about to meet some friends, and and as I cross through this meditation place where there's a sign outside that said, "Hey, if you're interested in meditation, like come in and you get like beginner meditation." So I went in, and I'm sitting there. And the person comes in and they start to lead them, like they start to talk us through what they're about to do. And so I sit there and they're like, okay, pay attention to your breath. And I start to do that. And then a couple seconds into that, I am all thinking about my mother randomly. And so, and I had no clue that I was doing that, that I was away from the activity I was supposed to be doing. But then at some point I caught it and I was like, oh God, I'm supposed to be doing this meditation. And so I come back to breathing. And when I did that, that I noticed that there was this feeling of like tension and anxiety that just lifted in me. And it was created because I was thinking about my mother. It was like a sad thought or whatever. I noticed I was feeling tense and tight. As soon as I peeled away from that thought and went into back to just breathing, coming back to the present moment, the tension lifted. And it was right then I realized that I'm like, oh my God, I have control. Like I have control of where my mind goes. I don't have to just think of whatever comes into my mind. And so, and so from then, I started to put all of this attention into how can I continue to train that? Yes, it could be laying down. Yes, it could be sitting. Yes, it could be walking. And yes, it could be as we eat food and just taste the food, be with every single bite. That's all meditation. I think though the training of it really is and should be eyes closed, like sitting down, like there doesn't, the movies kind of push some sort of posture or like a, some sort of sometimes a stance that necessarily is not always needing to be the case. That's not always important. It's just in a comfortable position. You have your eyes closed and you're coming back to present moment. And I think the breath is the first thing that is really taught. Coming back to it over and over again, and the body, like feeling the body head to toe, noticing what parts are tight, like going from eyebrows to cheeks to jaw to shoulders to arms to hands to chest to stomach, all the way through. And as you notice those sensations and just be with them, the mind settles. And so that's this training. My hope, and from the athletes that I'm working with, my hope is that they start to put 5 minutes in the beginning, but then kind of move into 10, 15, and then for those that are really into it, get into 15 to 20 minutes, but that takes lots of time, and I don't push that right away. It's usually 5 minutes in the beginning, and can we just spend time noticing when our mind has wandered, come back to present moment? Like repping that skill creates awareness and it creates presence and something for us to anchor to. Uh, so I know I threw a lot there and I gave kind of different perspectives of what could be done. And there's so many people that do this and there's so many different varieties. I don't say I offer the best variety. I don't think it matters. I think people intentionally putting time into this is what matters. And there's lots of people that give programs on how to do that.
That's amazing, and I appreciate you sharing that story too. And that's extremely insightful, and I think it shows how the benefits immediately can come into effect of practicing something like this. And so, thank you for kind of sharing that, and I
Mhm.
hope everyone can kind of get a good visual on how there is that feeling that gets lifted from just simply trying to follow the breath and get back into the present moment, and the positive effects, and how athletes who want to be great and want to be elite, how it really isn't this magic you know potion or whatever. It's the simplest thing of just trying to get back into your senses, get back into the moment, and get back into your breath, and not thinking so much. You can't think your way out of a problem. So
Yeah.
no, that was amazing, and I greatly appreciate your time and coming on today. And I think that's a good place to kind of wind it down. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but a lot of great insight, a lot of great tools, and a lot of high valuable information that I hope a lot of parents, athletes, coaches can take from it and immediately apply once they're done listening. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I look forward to having you on again and go over some other topics.
Yeah, look forward to it.